So, why Russell Brand? Is it a celebrity crush? Is it an attempt to just jump on his coattails and ride to glory? Yes, to both of those questions. But also, I feel like he and I are on a similar trajectory, that we've been asking the same questions and that there's different sources that we've been going to in order to try to find out the answers. And the two that now I should clarify that I skipped over Russell Brand 1.0, even though my friends tell me he's really funny. But I started about 4 years ago in his course of study, where he was looking at religion and global politics and going back for a degree in both of those. And what I've been looking at is spirituality and global economics. So where what I would call my sociological awakening started was close to 9/11, because I remember hearing they hate us because we love freedom. And that was such obvious bullshit that I couldn't believe anybody was falling for it. I didn't know who to talk to because everyone seemed to be in this fervor of patriotism and you just weren't allowed to question anything. And so I was feeling a lot of disconnection from all the people who were around me and trying to look at what's the reality here. And so I went into the bookstore, and the book that practically leapt into my hands was The Culture of Make-Believe by Derrick Jensen. And in this book, what Derrick talks about, it's not the big dramatic violence that you hear about. It's more the everyday. It's how violence has become so normalized in our culture that we don't even see it, that it's so much a part of the fabric of how we live that we can't even imagine living without it. So, I would say this is a spoiler alert that if you haven't seen The Good Place, you should, go over the next few seconds ahead of time. But it's a Netflix series, and the point of it is that all these people trying to go back again and again and again and live a good life, it's impossible. You can't do it. Things are just too complicated these days, and you think you're doing something good, but then that's causing all this havoc over here, and there is no way to get through your life without causing harm. And so I remember during this time, and when I started reading this book, that I would go into a grocery store and I would look at every product and I would say, oh my God, I know too much about how that's made. I can't get that. Even flowers, I couldn't get anything. And I would remember just abandoning my cart in the middle of the aisle and just leaving because I was paralyzed. There was nothing that I could do that I didn't already know what was going into the background of that. And just on an aside, another book that actually does that same thing in terms of Gaza and Palestine is this one called Palestine Inside Out. And again, it doesn't talk about the dramatic violence. It talks about just the everyday ways in which people are made to be subjected. And so that violence of the everyday and how that becomes both normalized and invisible to us put me into such a depression that I decided I needed something. I needed something that made sense of it all. And so I started doing this deep dive into religion. I took classes on world scriptures. I studied a bunch of different kinds of texts, but I needed something that had substance to it, something that could stand up to all of the things that I was hearing about in this reality. And one day there's a hermitage that I used to frequent, and I was taking a walk with a friend there, and I said, I read this interview in Sun magazine, and it was a guy, Reuben Hurricane Carter, and in solitary confinement, he talked about reading A Course in Miracles and how that changed his whole sense of what reality was and the course of his life. And so I asked him if he had ever heard of it, and my friend said, well, I've been studying it for the last 15 years, and it's not for everyone, but if you're asking, it might be right for you. And so at this point, I've been studying that for, I think, 17 years. This is my beat up copy that's falling apart. I have recently gone to a new version, but this is really useful because I can, take things camping with me, and I can hand things out to friends, and I don't have to worry about it. So that is something that has an entirely different way of thinking, and it's 1,500 densely written pages. It is not for wimps, and it has a whole course of meditation and guided meditation and experiments. That what they are that the only thing that really can change your mind is your own experience, and so this lets you raise to question some of the things that you think things are, and especially our relationship to each other. And I found that your experience can't really convince anyone else, but for myself, I can't kid myself. I can't kid myself that the reality that we think is here is really what there is. And so over the course of that time, I ended up doing a lot of research, particularly into money, and ended up writing this book, which is How to Dismantle an Empire. And the way that I recently have been describing it is a psilocybin journey into economics, because what it does is that it, again, takes your logic and takes facts and questions all of these different stories that we've been told about what money is, how things work, how things have to be, how things always have been, what democracy is, whether democracy was invented as a good thing. So it challenges a lot of the paradigms that we have that are the ways that we think before we think we're thinking. So what I've been seeing Russell doing, I started with some of his YouTubes, but then went on to the podcast and the Luminary, and in the Under the Skin interviews, Russell is asking the same questions. And I would say the biggest question, there's a lot of big questions. One is, what is reality? What's our real relationship to each other? But then on the sociological side is, can we develop what I call small-scale sovereignty? Just because it's a big enough phrase, then people can't even spell it, including me. and so it doesn't have a lot of baggage to it. And so I think Russell calls that community self-governance, but they both mean the same thing. Another word that means the same thing is anarchy, but anarchy has a lot of baggage because they make us think that it's chaos, but something I talk about in my book, because I go back to Greece and look at these archons, and these archons were the people who ruled over everyone. And anarchy means rule by rules rather than by rulers. So those have been my journey, and every time I have a random thought, it seems like Russell does a podcast on it, or that I hear something from his book Revelation, or I'll read my tarot card and it will be something that relates to something that he just talks about, or I'll do especially the meditations in Above the Noise have been so powerful to me. For one thing, I listen to them with my earphones on, and for another, I've been doing this month of microdosing on psilocybin, which is subperceptual amounts of it that just give more of that connection, that they are, it's something that is something to deepen my spiritual practice. And so when I listen to Russell doing his guided meditation through my earphones, I've got his voice inside my head and reverberating in my bones, and breathing. You know, it's that sense of breathing together. The word conspiracy literally means to breathe together. It con with, you know, spirit, you know, or inspire or respiratory, that all of that is breathing together. And so having this way of breathing with someone, it is a true conspiracy. And the other sense of spirit is purpose, is sharing the same purpose. And my feeling is that Russell and I share the same purpose, which is to enable a system in which everyone can reach their full potential, and where we can recognize that we're not even separate people, that we really are what all the mystics have come to. We really are one, and that our system can recognize that. Our economic system can be in line with that. So that's why Russell Brand. If you're intrigued and would like to go deeper into these ideas, here's another video on a related theme. And if you'd like to delve into this entire area, here's a playlist. Thank you, and I would love it if you would subscribe.